Hey everybody, welcome to the Middle of Nowhere. Today we're going to be going over a tour of the BIOS for the MSI motherboard, the B550M Pro-VDH Wi-Fi. This is a B550 AMD motherboard, and as you can see here inside it we have a Ryzen 3100 4-core processor. The GPU is an GTX 1650, and I did a video on this build a little bit ago, so please feel free to check that out. But for today's video I just want to kind of give you an overview of the BIOS and how you can set XMP, as well as PBO, which is Precision Boost Overclock, or PBO2 if you have a Ryzen 5000 series CPU, Resizable Bar, and also how to update the BIOS. So starting off, once you spam that delete key after turning on the computer, you'll be presented with the basic or quick setup for the BIOS. Here, if all you want to do is set XMP, you can do that. You can see here this motherboard comes with 2 XMP profiles. We have set ours to XMP2. If you don't set XMP for your DDR4 memory, you will be relegated to its base speeds, which I believe for this is either 2100 or 2600, something like that. Having the higher speed helps Ryzen CPUs, so always be sure to, at a minimum, set your XMP profile. On the base screen, you can also see the CPU. You have memory. Here again are our timings. It's DDR4 3600 CL18, so 18 referring to the very first set of numbers, and then it goes to 42. Then you can see what storage is present. We have an NVMe drive in our M.2 slot. This is in the lower slot as it's M.2_2, and we have one 3.5-inch SATA hard drive. It's 2 terabytes. Here under fan info, you can set your fan curve for any PWM fans that you might have. Our CPU cooler is a 4-pin fan header, so that is PWM. Our 2 case fans, however, are 3-pin, so I don't believe I'll be able to adjust the curve. In order to do that, you can see here I can't actually click on anything. You need to hit this cog icon. So click that, and then now you can kind of set the curve. It's really neat that you can set your own custom fan curve, so that way you can keep temps down and noise to a minimum as you need it. So, and this is also the system temperature, so you can kind of get a feel for all the temps as well. So it's really nice. All right, so to get out of that, just hit escape, and then we have help. So this will give you basically general directions on how to navigate the BIOS. We'll get to the M flash in a bit. So hardware monitor, let's see what that does. Okay, so that just takes us back to where we were. Escape out of that. And then you can do some basic things here to turn off. So we can change our BIOS from UEFI to CSM. I highly recommend you don't do that. The UEFI BIOS is a more modern look and feel and lets you just get things done a lot quicker. You can turn on a CPU fan fail warning if you want. And ERP ready, I assume this kind of makes it into a more energy efficient, so your clock speeds might not be as high, so you might not want to do that. Easy LED control, this will turn off the debug LEDs on the system. I don't believe it shuts off all the LEDs in terms of like your RGB. That you'll have to do via software. To set Resizable Bar or activate or tweak with PBO or do any kind of other overclocking, you're going to want to go to the advanced mode. All you have to do is tap F7 on your keyboard, or you can just go ahead and click there where it says advanced mode. And to get back to it, easy mode, you can just click on it again. So here again, we are presented with some options on both sides of the screen. So we can save and load overclocking profiles. This is pretty handy. So again, this is all, I think, custom, and then you'll set a name for it. This isn't like preset profiles. That would be actually kind of cool if it were. And then getting out of that, again, hardware monitor, same thing as before, as that we saw in easy mode. Board Explorer, this is a cool thing. So you just hover over things and it will kind of give you information about the slots of the board. It will also tell you what's installed. So here, our Ryzen 3 3100, again, our RAM. Here that's empty, so we click hover over here, it tells us where our SSD is. Okay, so it's USB 3, it's for the front USB 3. I don't know why it's showing kind of a reverse, but that's okay. This is our SATA, so we can see here that in one of our SATA ports, SATA port 4, we have our 2 terabyte hard drive, fan connector, our ATX 12 volt. It's kind of neat, it really shows what all is connected. So here we, in the USB 2 ports, our keyboard and our mouse. HDMI is empty, our display port. So, yep, so this actually shows what's connected. So display port is not being used, none of these are being used. Our Wi-Fi, it says M.2 empty, that's funny because the Wi-Fi antenna is connected. And then yes, there's nothing on the audio. And our CPU power, and here's our GPU. That's cool. So NVIDIA Corporation VGA compatible controller. It doesn't tell you the specific model, but yeah, it definitely tells you what's connected. So that's the board explorer. And then we can go to settings. So we have system status. This just again gives you an overview of what's connected to your system. So again, our 2 hard drives, some of the, what else is this? So the BIOS build date. So you can see I updated to the most current BIOS at least as of March. They might have released a later one. You can set time and date here if it's not exactly how it should be, although I would suggest doing that in Windows. In settings, go to advanced. This is where you're gonna set up Resizable Bar as well as PBO. So we go to PCIe subsystems, Resizable Bar support, make sure it's enabled. Again, even if you have a older GTX card, make sure this is enabled. And the reason why is because AMD has their AMD High Fidelity FX technology. It works on older GPUs that do not have ray tracing, etc. But what it does is if the game supports it, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider or Cyberpunk, it will give you higher frames. And I kind of talk about that a little bit on the build video for this computer. It's really handy, so you want to make sure that Resizable Bar is enabled as well as above 4G memory cryptocurrency mining is enabled. Even if you're not mining crypto, it doesn't matter. That 4G part is for the Resizable Bar. Other than that, you don't need to really touch anything there. Again, that's PCIe subsystem settings. In advance as well, for PBO, you go to AMD overclocking, accept, and you are given Precision Boost Overdrive. So here's the setting for that right there. I only just ever enable this. This is usually set to auto. If you want to tweak with it, do some undervolting, which is basically delivering less power so you have lower temps while still maintaining a higher frequency, you can do that. There are guides out there that will help you with Precision Boost Overdrive, undervolting, and maintaining the overclock. What Precision Boost Overdrive does, for those of you that don't know, is it allows you to sustain higher CPU frequencies, either at a single core or all core, and ultimately it will give you a better gaming experience. So essentially, and it should maintain the same temperatures. Otherwise you have a bit more fluctuation. So if you do notice though that your temps are getting too high, I would probably just disable PBO or set it back to auto. Again, I only ever just have it enabled because I don't know enough to be able to muck with all the advanced stuff, the PBO limits and the thermal throttle and all that crap. So that's really it. Those are the core basic things that you want to set up, which is again XMP, your Resizable Bar and 4G encoding, and then AMD overclocking to do PBO. If you want to get into further overclocking, you can go into the OC tab. You can actually tweak your memory settings if you really want to. So you would turn the XMP profile off, and then from there you would go into your DRAM frequency, set the frequency you want. So we want DDR4 3600, and then it should, where do we have here? So is this for the timings? Yeah. So this is where you can really manually tweak your timings. You can also get into the further sub timings. So if you really know what you're doing, you can go ahead and really have fun with this motherboard to get the most out of your system. If you don't, I again would highly just recommend you stick to XMP and the other settings that I mentioned. What else can you do? You can also set the CPU frequency within and the voltage and all that good stuff here. So that's really it for kind of the basic tour. It's not a super complex motherboard, which is nice. I didn't go through everything. Like, you can just really explore. And again, if you accidentally change something and you're like, oh, I don't want it changed at all, then you can just get away with basically keep hitting escape, and then it will say quit without saving, and you're gonna just say yes. So yeah, there's really no risk until you enable anything that you changed, which is a good thing. But you can go through and explore the BIOS, and there is security, there's trusted computing, so you can set up a TPM device if you want an actual hardware TPM. Right now we're set to FTPM, which is firmware based, so it's on the CPU itself. But this motherboard does have a terminal or a header for a physical TPM module if you want to do that and get more security from your TPM. You can set your boot options if you want. Right now we have our hard disk. So it just goes through that. You can actually change the order of how things boot. You can just have the full screen logo display enabled, turn that on or off. You can have, if you have an internal speaker, you can have a post beep, which is always nice. The beeps can sometimes tell you if something is wrong or not. Info block effect. I don't actually know what that is, so I'm gonna leave that. ACPI settings, power LED for blinking, CPU above temperature alert, that's set to auto. Let's see what else we got. Integrated peripherals. So you can turn things on and off here. So you can set hot plug, so that's kind of cool. If you do, what does that do? RAID mode, so you can set RAID mode. So we can do SATA port hot plugging. So what that means is you should be able to plug in and unplug a hard drive while it's on, the computer's on, I believe. I mean, that's to me what it means, hot swappable. Let's see here. USB configuration. Enhance mouse pointer speed, sure. Super I/O, so if you have a serial port, there's a serial port header on the motherboard, so if you have a serial port device, you can set that up. Again, don't know what any of this means, never used it. Power management, so ERP ready. Does this have a description? No. Restore after AC power loss, system power fault protection, Windows OS configuration, so you can set up secure boot if you need to. I'm pretty certain that might be required for Windows 11, correct me if I'm wrong. So NVIDIA EFI driver, wake up event, so you can have things disabled or enabled for waking up from, I assume, sleep. You can secure erase things. And then of course your NVMe test, so this will just test the device that it's on. Yes. Okay, so we're there. Went through all of that, and then again with the overclocking, a whole bunch of stuff here. I'm not going to go through all of it. There's just so much. Really, the BIOS is, I mean, it's for power users. It's definitely layered. That's why there's a simple view, which is nice. So for if you just need to set certain things, like again XMP, Resizable Bar can appear up the top. It's not here, so that's why I had to go into the advanced mode for that, which is unfortunate. Sometimes, like for my Dark Hero, Resizable Bar was at the top, so you can just turn it on right there. Anyway, let's go ahead and go into flashing the BIOS, which is a lot easier than you might think. And it is important with these AMD systems to keep the BIOS up to date because they're always adding RAM compatibility. And as I stated in the build video for this motherboard, the RAM was not at first compatible with the original BIOS that came with this motherboard, which was the released BIOS from 2020. The RAM was released in 2021, so it worked in its default configuration of its base speed, but it would not set XMP profile. Once I updated the BIOS, the RAM compatibility must have been added to the quality vendor list, or QVL, and I could enable XMP with no problem. So updating BIOS can help things, it can fix things, so it's definitely good to know how to do. So let me go get my flash drive and we'll do that. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and flash the BIOS. I've gone to the product page for the MSI B550M Pro-VDH Wi-Fi motherboard, went to the support page, clicked on BIOS, and downloaded the most recent BIOS, which came out not too long ago actually, I think late May. So I downloaded it, I extracted the folder, the zip file folder, excuse me, and took just the BIOS file, which is really nice. There's also a little text document that tells you what was updated, so if you're curious about that, you can click on that. But all you need is a USB flash drive. You drag over the file. There's no other kind of technical doodadery that you have to do. Bring your flash drive over to your computer that you want to update the BIOS on, insert it while you're in the BIOS, click on M-Flash, and the system will auto reboot and enter flash mode. Again, to do that in advanced mode, same thing, just click on M-Flash, so I'll be doing the same thing. Let's go back to simple and do it there. Yes. Oh, actually, no. Oh, good. So it was still, so I didn't save any of the changes I just did. So now it reboots and it's gonna start in flash mode. This is kind of different for me. I've never seen a motherboard do that. Most of the time it doesn't require a restart in the motherboards that I've used, that's including 𝐏𝐫𝐈 and ASUS. but maybe this is just particular to this MSI motherboard. Also, ASRock hasn't required like a reboot just to do the flashing. So it will do this, and provided the front USB port works, because that's where I connected the USB stick, then we should be good to go. I probably should have done it in the motherboard itself, and I kind of recommend doing that. But it looks like we have it there. So here you can see that's our current BIOS, unless it changed, because it should be 2B. There it is. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why. Oh, that's right, because I put in 2 different directories just in case it wouldn't read it. So this is the one that we're upgrading to. So 517 is when it came out. So and you can see in this directory, that's the old one, came out in March, in mid-March. So we're gonna do this one, and then right here, and it shows all the hard drives that are connected. So, but you wanna make sure it's on a thumb drive. So then you just click yes, or enter rather, and then are you sure you wanna select this file? Yes. And then you just wait. So you get this nice little screen, and it will update. It shouldn't take more than 5-10 minutes. And make sure your system does not restart, does not shut down, because you could break your motherboard. And that's any motherboard. When you're flashing the BIOS, you gotta make sure you have good power and that this isn't going anywhere. Highly recommend you don't do it during a thunderstorm, or if you have an older house like I do, don't run the microwave and the PlayStation 5 at the same time. Otherwise you're gonna blow a circuit while doing this. And you can also see here that it's going from v2.a0 to v2.b0. So that's kind of cool too. You can see what you're going to. So it went into Windows, and we can check the new BIOS through CPU-Z, and we should have, there it is, 2.B0. So that's our current BIOS, updated 5.17.22, just like the flash stick and support site said. So that's the main method through the BIOS itself. The other way is to do it via the BIOS flashback button. So let's go ahead and check that out. As you can see here, I've turned the computer around. I've already installed the USB stick underneath the HDMI port, as that is the USB port you want to use. The reason I turned the computer around is there's a little light here that I want you to be able to see. So the computer is fully off, the power supply is still on. So this again is it's already built scenario, but I want to use the BIOS flash button as opposed to inside the BIOS itself. So I've installed the older BIOS that we already just updated to see if that hopefully works, because it wasn't working for me already. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit the button. Fingers crossed, this actually works. Because before the light was turning solid. So this light should stay blinking the entire time while it updates. Unfortunately, I could not get the BIOS flashback button process to update the BIOS to work whatsoever. The light would go from blinking to solid. The activity light on the USB drive would not even start. So I don't really know if it's my motherboard that's defective or if I'm really just supposed to update the BIOS while the computer is apart. I am adding a screenshot of the instructions as well as the proper port. Again, the USB port you want to use is right below the HDMI port. And you can go with USB 2 or 3. I've used both successfully on other motherboards. Just make sure it's formatted to FAT32. And of course, you do need to rename the BIOS file to msi.rom, which is again detailed in these instructions that I'm showing you right now. At least I was able to show you how to successfully update the BIOS within the BIOS itself using the mFlash tool. Let me know if you've had any issues with this BIOS flashback button on this particular motherboard. I'd love to hear from you. Maybe I just have to do it when the computer is, kind of apart. No CPU, no RAM, only the 24-pin and CPU power plugged in, and that's it. Again, though, I have used the BIOS flashback button with a fully assembled computer on a Gigabyte motherboard, so I don't see why it would be an issue here, but I'm just going to chalk this up to a loss and call it a day. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Leave any comments or questions you have down below, and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Show your support for the channel by getting subscribed, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any future content. And hey, while you're here, stick around and watch another video I've made. I'm Seth, and I'll see you next time in the middle of nowhere.